Welcome to Better Bedtime Chronicles. You're listening to Nicole
and Bridget. Together we have 15 years experience working directly with families struggling with sleep challenges.
We share stories, advice, and deep dives into all things sleep. Let's go.
Heads up, the sound quality on this episode is like a really crappy Zoom call, so bear with us. We do get better as the next episodes go on.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah. How was your week?
It's been busy, but good.
What's been going on?
Just kid stuff. And it's funny, it's like on point for today because I'm just so aware of that there's no newborn or new baby in my house because we're able to enjoy other things right now that I know in that moment it would have been very hard to do.
Yeah, we're about to dive into some talk on newborns. But without a newborn this weekend, we got to have some fun.
Yes, we did. We got to bring our kids to see the Taylor Swift Eras movie.
It was so cute.
So cute.
They just danced up a storm.
Cartwheels.
Yeah, they were like putting on a full show in front of the show.
It was. You were good with that too. You were
cute.
Good, like rooting them on.
I wanted to get them up and dance because I told my girls before we went in, I was like you're allowed to run around and dance and sing and cheer. Like you don't have to be quiet in this movie. You can like bop, right?
It's so true.
But they were all just sitting there with their little like hands in their laps, like so polite. And I was like, no, get up. It's fun. We'll dance.
It was so fun. It's like the next best thing to, obviously I'm not going to, can't bring all my kids. I
No.
can't even get myself to the concert, let alone my kids. So that was nice to do. And then I thought it was fun too, how, they were jumping around crazy, but then I thought the next time you go to the movies,
I know,
it's going to be like reel it in.
I had the exact same thought. And I'm like, we can never go to the movies again.
They're going to
think they can do cartwheels down the alleys.
That's okay. We'll have to adjust.
It was cute. And then the next day, this was a really cute story actually. So then I wasn't sure how my oldest like felt about it because she was kind of quiet. She wasn't dancing as much. My little one was just dancing all over the place. But anyway, so I didn't know like what her vibe was, and then I didn't really, I was like, oh, did you have fun? Yeah, it was great. Okay. And then the next morning we're sitting at breakfast and she like puts her hands on the table. She's like, so can we all say our favorite moments from the Taylor Swift concert last night? And I was like, yes, of course we can.
My heart.
I know. And then the cutest thing is I was telling her like what my favorite song was, which is the Don't Blame Me song when all the lights like go up in the sky. I think that's so cool looking. And I was telling her and she's like, oh, that's from the Reputation era, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, kid, like you were an encyclopedia of Taylor Swift knowledge.
It's almost like her mommy's a Swiftie.
It's almost like that. Anyway, that was like so special for me, just like making that connection with her and sharing something that I love.
It's nice.
It's cool.
Yeah, I feel like every stage of momming, like, or parenting these little ones has their like hard times and their good times, and that kind of moment of us all getting out like that, it's just something when you're laying there at night with a newborn baby who's up all night or fussy, it can feel like you're isolated, you're alone, you're the only one maybe going through this, and it can be hard to picture these future like moments together or these exciting things, but we're here to tell you that those moments do come.
They're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming for you.
We each have 3 close in age, and it just felt like newborns or toddlers, everything forever. And there's fun things you can do and enjoy in those moments, absolutely. And it's important to find that. But it is nice, too, to look forward to some of these exciting things.
Yeah,
so
it was a big moment of community for us. Like we went as a group with all of our mom friends. And
we had, what, 15?
I don't know, probably 15 of us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you're exactly right. I think the newborn period is so marked by isolation. Yeah. Like it really is. And, of course, that's what contributes to significant mental health challenges. And the best way to kind of deal with that is to surround yourself with supports. But that's easier said than done sometimes.
It is.
Especially depending on, like, your circumstance and things like that. So,
yeah, like what kind of family support. I find, I don't know about you, but a lot of our clients are alone. They've either moved far away, they don't have that family support, or it's just not going the way they had hoped. There's a lot, I'm sure any listeners. Dynamics.
Yeah.
It's tricky. And then some will hire help, like a doula, like, sleep help or whatever that looks like. But again, that's not always an option. So we're here today to tell you some key newborn sleep foundations that you can bring into your home, like on your own, or have others in your village help you with these few things. There's a key moment I think of when I was like young when I had my first. I was 24. And I remember being in our apartment. This is like uptown Waterloo. And I was in the rocking chair with him. This baby was up every 90 minutes forever till I sleep trained him at 9 or 10 months. And I remember looking up through my window out, and I could see the top few floors of the Laurier Library, which is where I just finished my undergrad. I actually got pregnant in my last stretch of my undergrad. So my grad photos, I had a baby bump.
Cute.
And so I remember, and in that moment when you're a student, you're exhausted, you're so consumed by your studies. I remember being at the library and like put my head down, have a nap, just so tired. At least I thought I was tired at that time. And then when I was in this baby room, in this gliding rocking chair with this baby in my arms who would not sleep, and I would look over at that library lit up at night,
Yeah.
thinking, I wish I was that tired and not this tired. And I
So
felt so
true.
alone.
Yeah. Nothing feels more exhausting than a crying baby at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And like hopelessness, right? You don't know what to do. You don't know how to help this thing. All you want to do is solve every problem that baby has, and you can't. And yeah, and you feel like you're the only one doing it.
You do. You're alone. I remember longing for my before life.
Yeah.
Like, oh my, what have I done?
Yeah.
What did I do to do this? And oh my gosh, I can't believe. And also for those who know the KW area, it was Oktoberfest weekend.
Oh gosh.
So there was a hall.
Everyone's having fun.
Everyone's partying, ziggy zaggy, like all the stuff. and I'm just like trying to picture. I would fantasize like getting in this crib, like something. Yeah. I'm not a dainty person, so to get in a crib is like not happening for me. But it's just really, really hard. So we're here to share with you some things that hopefully will just get you through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk, you're touching on something that I think is really important and something I love to talk to families about when we're speaking specifically about the newborn period, because this is such a key part of it. So there is a psychiatrist whose name is escaping me, but we'll include in our bio, who coined the term matrescence as this transition that women in particular in this case go through when they become a parent. And she says it's akin to adolescence. So like the changes in identity and in like how we understand ourselves and the way that we interact within the world are so significant in the transition to motherhood that they're the same or akin to what a person would go through becoming an adult. Which is wild because I'm sure you remember fondly, and also the hardships of becoming that transition, becoming an adolescent and a teen and all that stuff that happens. So yeah, you're going through a huge identity shift when you become a mother, and everything changes about your world. And that transition is hard, and like it's important to normalize that it feels hard, and it's important to normalize that you miss your old life and who you were before, and like those things are really real feelings. And it doesn't mean you don't love your baby or you're not happy to be a parent, or like a lot of mothers can carry guilt about those feelings. But I think it's really important to just acknowledge, like, yeah, those are real. That identity shift is real, and it takes a long time to find yourself as a mother and a person outside of your children again. Like that's something I'm still working on, and my oldest is almost 7, right?
Yeah.
So
I like that way you describe it. It's like this big change, and once you do it, there's no going back.
Yeah.
So which that feeling was just
scary.
Brutal for me, for many of us. So it's nice to hear it and know we're not alone, and that you can make it through and find your kind of new footing.
Yeah.
But for me too, it took a long time. And it felt like because there's this human baby to keep alive and all these other things, there's no going back.
No.
And so it was, that was a hard. So those are like key moments for me. And then of course, after having multiple kids, I start like bringing in more early on, like newborn sleep, whatever I can do, because I knew after there's a better way. I don't have to just bear it. And I mean, it's tiring. We're recovering from childbirth and adjusting to all of this. But there's still some things you can do, which hopefully you can take some of these tips we're about to give you and do them in your home.
That's it, right? It's like, and I say to families, like, it's survival time. That's okay. Like, newborn sleep is inherently unpredictable. There's not very much you can do to control it, but there are things you can do to kind of like guide it in the right direction. And if you have the perception that this too shall pass, like that's an easy thing for me to say. But when you really understand that this is a stage, this newborn period is a stage, and you can kind of make attempts to appreciate like the joyful parts of it, really soak in all those cuddles and snuggles. Like that's the most cuddly time with your little one. And then also know that the hard stuff is going to get better. Like I can't say that enough.
I'm always envious of first-time parents who have that wisdom right out the gate of like, this too shall pass. This is
Yeah.
temporary. That's definitely something I didn't have my first child.
Totally.
When you know and you've lived through it, you can see that's what happens. It's so fleeting. Um, but in the moment, it can be really hard. So I love when people have that, but I was not someone who had that because it just feels all consuming.
Yeah.
Takes over you. There's no end in sight. And plus, you see and hear people whose kids are older,
Oh,
babies are
yeah.
older, toddlers, they still never sleep.
Yeah.
And it takes some time to learn that actually there are things you can do about
Mhm.
that.
So maybe we should talk about like expectations. Like what is normal for newborn sleep? What is reasonable to expect from a newborn?
Well, I think you had said it in one of your papers that we had looked at early years ago was the only consistent is that it's inconsistent.
Yeah. Newborns don't have any like consistent sleep cycles, so it's very normal for them to have a 15-minute nap or a 5-hour nap. Both of those would be common. Frequent waking to feed is also very common, especially in those early days, right? We're establishing a secure feeding plan and everything's working out there. Um, Sometimes we wake our babies to eat in the first couple weeks until they reach birth weight. So certainly, like inconsistent sleep
Yeah.
is really par for the course with a newborn.
Yeah, and imagine having that perspective. So instead of thinking, "Oh, they woke again," or "What's
Yeah,
happening?"
what's
or "Why is this
wrong?
nap so short?" It's so frustrating, but to just realize like you don't really have control over that. That's normal. So
Yeah.
developmental. It actually would be more unusual to have a newborn who slept beautifully,
Yeah,
like through the night or
absolutely.
whatever.
For sure.
And over the years too, as we get inquiries, and we're always like, no shame, call with anything or reach out with anything. And that's the nice thing is we're always very direct, very
Mhm.
honest about what is reasonable, like what's developmentally appropriate, and what is something that could be improved on or get a little bit better. And so I remember years ago I had a call from a client of a 2-week-old baby, first time mom, and she phoned and said, I heard you can help get my baby to sleep through the night. 2 weeks old. I was like, sorry, I cannot. We can set good sleep foundations with setting good expectations,
Yeah.
and a few other things as we're about to mention here, but not to sleep through the night at that age.
No, and I think it's really reassuring for clients when they hear that from us, right? Because
Yeah.
they're getting this, everyone has a cousin's brother's friend whose baby slept through the night at 1 week, right? And like those are the stories that get told and shared with parents. And they're like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my baby? What am I doing wrong? Absolutely nothing. Like this is very developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
Another thing that's very developmentally appropriate is babes at that age love to sleep attached nearby their parents. So parents will regularly call and say, everyone tells me baby needs to be on their back in their bassinet, which of course is what the APA recommends for safe sleep guidelines. But my baby will only sleep if she's on my chest. And so it's normalizing that. It's talking about, okay, like how can we make these sleep choices as safe as possible? Of course, when you're awake, it's fine to have your baby sleep on your chest. There's no problem with that at all. And of course, they love that because they've been inside a nice cushy womb for 9 months. Like, of course, they want to be all cuddly with parents. So things like that, like it's important to recognize, like not everybody has this like picture perfect newborn baby sleep. In fact, I would argue almost nobody does.
Yeah.
So yeah, just normalizing that.
I like that. And it truly, comparison is the thief of joy. And social media, I feel like, has made it 1,000 times worse. Like with, oh, they slept this long or whatever. And then it could be like, well, what did I do wrong that I didn't get that? So hopefully you know that it's not really up to you or, not in our control. So just do what you can. And you're right too. Same with like Health Canada recommends baby sleep close by to just hear you.
Yeah.
Be close by to respond. But whatever works. Like for us, I remember our old house when we had the kids and was so tiny. The bedrooms were all off of this like tiny hallway. So we were the people who put baby in their bedroom right away because they were like 8 steps away.
You
and
could
it
hear
felt
them very clearly.
very too clearly with all the noises and the grunts. But I know that would be a no probably, right? But I think it depends on the space you're sleeping in, the proximity.
Yeah.
And just your comfort level too, because that we would never have slept with them right beside. I think then I would go insane, which is a whole other problem to manage. So it's like balancing all of that out.
Yeah.
So good expectations right out the gate can go a long way. That they're going to wake normal. They're not like frequently, sorry, and they're not going to have super long stretches of sleep likely in the night.
Yeah. That's definitely normal stuff.
And on that note of safe sleep space or where we're going to have them, let's make sure it's as safe as possible. Because while you're laying there with the little sleep you are getting, the last thing we need is you rolling through what could go wrong or having the slightest concern that your baby's unsafe or could get into an unsafe position.
Totally.
So rule of thumb is a flat surface, no clutter in the space, wherever it is, bassinet, crib, or what have you. So tight fitted sheet, no blankets, even if it was made by Nana and it's special. Put that somewhere else for now. There will be a good time for that. It's not at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then making sure the temperature is on the coolish side, 20 to 22 degrees, something like that.
I have such a good story about this. So, of course, like my first kid, we're in the hospital. Everyone like constantly is coming in, making sure she's warm enough. Like, oh, put her hat on, wrap her up, blah, blah, blah. Hospital's cold, right? So
Is she winter baby, right?
She's a winter baby.
Yes,
She was
yes.
born in February, and the hospital's cold, and so everyone, it felt like, was obsessed with this baby's temperature. So when I got home, I was like, okay, we cannot let this baby get cold. Like, this baby has to be warm. So for her first night, I had a little, like, you know, those baby boxes. Do you remember those? I don't even know if they still exist now.
Those were awesome.
They were great.
Yeah,
So for the listener, if you don't know, they were like a box that was safe for a baby to sleep in, and then they also came with like a bunch of free stuff, so free diapers and diaper rash cream and stuff like that. And they're awesome because they're free, and so literally anyone can have a safe space for their baby to sleep. If they don't have those, they should get them back. They're wicked. So anyway, she was in one of those right beside my bed. And I had put her in like a onesie and then like a flannel onesie and then one swaddle and then a second swaddle on top. So this kid was wearing 4 layers. It's okay. You can laugh at me. This kid was wearing 4 layers. And of course I had the heat cranked in the house and she had a hat on her head. Anyway, she slept through the night. I mean, not through the night, but in the night. And the midwife was coming the next morning. This is her first night of life. And she's like, so how did the first night go? And I was like, oh, good. Like, I hope she was warm enough. And she was like, oh, why? What did you put her in? And I told her, and she like had this look of terror on her face. And I was like, oh, fuck, I've already screwed this up. I'm like, what happened? And she's like, well, it's all fine because your baby's fine, but she's like, you really, really like err on the side of cold. It's better for her to be cold. It's safer for her to be slightly cold than too warm. Overheating is a risk of SIDS. So she's like, take like 5 of those layers off. So of course she showed me like what would be an appropriate thing for her to sleep in. Just if anyone cares, it's like 1 layer of clothing and then 1 like swaddle or sleep sack is fine for winter. And if your house does run cold, you can get like a thicker sleep sack or a thicker swaddle that's like slightly warmer. But I think a general rule of thumb for babies is dress them like with 1 more layer than what you need on any given moment. But anyway, that was my like major first night baby failure.
the first of how many for
7
me. 7
million.
Yeah. It's so hard. You don't know till you know, right?
You don't
God
know.
bless the midwives and everyone who like gently is like,
Yeah.
not like that.
I know. Because the last thing she wants to do is provide me with feedback, right? But
it's survival feedback at that point to have an overheated baby, right? It's important.
That is it.
Yeah, so the temperature is a big deal. We love a little bit of white noise or a nice dark room if you can get it. That can help with differentiating night and day as well. So keeping the daytime bright.
Yeah.
Use daylight or have lights on, whatever. And then as you transition to nighttime, to have that dark, cozy space. And depending on what time of year you have a newborn, sometimes that's easier to pull off, and other times it's hard, depending on where you live too, because it can be light till 9-10 o'clock at night in the summer.
Babies often have their days and nights switched when they're born. So I tell families like, when the parent who's birthing the baby is moving around the world, they often are kind of like rocking their baby to sleep. So baby is snoozing during the day when parent is active. And then, of course, when the parent lays down at night, they're restful, the baby can move around a little bit more. And that's when you're getting all those kicks in the evening, right? So often babies are born having been sleeping through the day and awake at night. And then all of a sudden on the outside world, they're being taught that they have to switch that back up. So what Bridget's talking about with the night and day and the light and dark is a really good strategy to help them make it through that brief stage where their days and nights are switched.
And that's a good perspective too. It's like, this is just in their bones, like how they've been. And so now they're on the outside, and this is something simple that we can do to keep the night and day separate. So hopefully they'll sleep when you sleep eventually, right?
Yeah. So those are the kind of like ideal sleeping situations. Certainly something to work towards if that's your your goal for your family. But I do want to talk about something that is like a passion of mine. So oftentimes, and this is more true, this was more true when my kids were newborns and less true now, I hope. But there was so much fear mongering around co-sleeping, and every single practitioner you saw was like, that baby's sleeping down on their own crib space, blah, blah, blah. And of course, like that was my goal as a parent. Like I worked so hard to get my first kid sleeping in her own space. But the reality is sometimes that didn't happen, right? Like whether I fell asleep nursing or she had a really fussy night. So we propped ourselves up with pillows and had her on our chest. Like we were doing all these like variations on co-sleeping essentially in order to survive. But when a doctor would ask me, I wouldn't tell him because, or her, I would say, no, well, yeah, of course, baby's in the crib, because I felt a lot of shame about those choices and I felt a lot of guilt about those choices. And my big passion around this is this, like if parents are making the choice to co-sleep out of habit, or sorry, out of necessity or out of desire, they ought to have like information about how to do that safely. And this fear mongering that happens when practitioners are asking these questions prevents people from actually getting helpful information. And I cannot tell you the number of times I'll speak to a new family who's like, yeah, we're co-sleeping. And then I'm like, oh, tell me more. What does that look like? And every single one tells me that they've got pillows underneath their arms, baby on their chest, and they're sitting upright in bed. And of course, we know that's a very unsafe way to co-sleep. I hate to tell you this if you're doing this. I'm sorry, I'm not shaming you, but I'm just explaining there are safer ways to co-sleep. And the real risk in that scenario are the pillows, right? I know you're trying to, keep your body in a good position so that the baby doesn't go anywhere near the pillows. But if for whatever reason you lose your capacity to keep that arm in place, that baby's in a pillow, and that's a really dangerous spot. So I do want to talk briefly about the ways to co-sleep safely if that's the choice you're making, or if that's a choice you need to make out of necessity. So essentially, same as, whether they're in a crib or not, we want like a flat, firm mattress. We want no pillows or blankets anywhere near the baby. So if parent who's co-sleeping wants a pillow, keep it up by the head. And pretty much I would just suggest no blankets, but if you need blankets, they go down past your hips. Baby, best position for a breastfeeding parent is ideal on their side so that baby has full access to the breast. Access to the breast and access to frequent nursing while you're co-sleeping does reduce the risk of SIDS. So if baby's almost like in a side-lying nursing position and mom is kind of in the fetal position, that's the actual safest position for babies to co-sleep in. Certainly also key for co-sleeping is to reduce no drug and alcohol use when baby is sharing a bed. Ideally, no older siblings are in the bed as well, although that can become a tricky thing. No pets in the bed. And if the other parent is in the bed, then they also have to carry this level of awareness that baby is in. Interestingly, a lot of families think baby in the middle of the bed is safer, but actually probably baby on the outside of the bed is safer, because then only one parent is at risk of rolling over rather than two. So those are just some tips. Again, like anybody else, we recommend the safest sleeping options. We want to reduce the risk of SIDS. But if you are heading towards a co-sleeping situation, those things greatly reduce the risk. So yeah, if you're co-sleeping, just try and do it safely.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that, because there is a ridiculous amount of shame around it. And then it creates this massive divide amongst parents, especially new parents, of I'm a co-sleeper, and then I'm not. And then it's like a lot of feelings and emotions around that. I've been sucked into that myself, because it can feel like when someone tells you it's wrong, whether sleep training's wrong or co-sleeping is wrong, let's say, you feel, well, I'm doing that for my child or my family. Well, I must be doing something wrong. And of course, we're going to get our back up about that.
Yeah, and then you get defensive.
Oh, yeah. And then it creates, it's an awkward thing. So all this to say, like, there's no, like, right or wrong, whatever way. Just whatever you do, be safe about it and have good expectations can carry you really, really far.
And gather information, right? Like, tell your midwife or your doctor or your therapist or whatever, so that they can share information with you rather than keeping it a secret, because we need to eliminate the shame around those things.
We do. And I was happy to see, although it's kind of piddly at the back of the book, but there's a sleep guide out from Public Health, so for all of Canada, and you can get these booklets, and it goes over these things we mentioned, right? Like, don't be smoking cigs and blowing in your kid's face, whatever, all of the safe sleep things on their back, all that stuff. But finally now there is a page in that says if you bed share.
Good.
And it has all these things that we're saying too, the things that you just said.
Yeah.
But it's very much like the last page, literally,
Right.
before it switches to the French
This
side.
is probably the first time that page has even been in that book. Though,
That's what
right?
I'm
Or at least
thinking.
in 20 years.
It's because it was always like, just no. It's
Yeah.
like saying abstinence.
Yeah,
is
that's
the key.
exactly.
Like, you still,
that's exactly what this
right?
is.
Like, you still need to
Yeah.
teach safe sex,
Yeah.
right? You still need to
Yeah.
teach a safe way to co-sleep.
Yeah.
And so that's nice to see that there. And I think many of us too know, as we work with different practitioners in the same landscape as us, so
Mhm.
doulas or lactation consultants, whatever, they all have been saying these things all along.
Yeah, totally.
Which has been nice
This is
because
it.
this is a reality of I definitely, and I'm so
For
strict
sure.
about sleep. I've co-slept with all of them at different points,
Yeah,
or
me
most
too.
of them I should say, because it
Mhm.
just felt right at different times.
Yeah.
So
And we need to trust in our ability to make that choice as parents, right?
yes,
And our
yes.
practitioners ought to trust us in our judgment when we're making those choices.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so. And following these key sort of things that you can do. So
Yeah.
empty space,
Yeah.
firm mattress. We're on the cooler side, and we're dressing them not too warm. one layer, normal plus one layer. We know there's so many different fabrics and types of sleep sacks that can help if your house is a colder
Yeah,
house.
for sure.
And so we lean on. I'm a secondhand shopper. I love Once Upon a Child or Pre-Loved at Encore downtown Cambridge, or online, of course, the sky's the limit. There's many different kinds that you can get.
Mhm.
So having that there is great. And then something that I found helpful too, this depends on your situation at home. If you have a partner who's able to do this, or like your mom, or maybe you hire a doula, whatever that looks like for you. But something that was absolute key to my survival with the 3 children in the newborn period was having a bit of a split night. So while we did have the baby on a routine where we segued into bedtime and had that dark space from, let's say, 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. or somewhere in that ballpark, something that we did that I think saved me was I was off duty from 7:30 or whatever it was until 11 or midnight. And so my partner would come home from work, we'd eat dinner together, and then I was basically sent to the bedroom.
Yeah.
And so now, I won't lie, there were weeks in a row that I would lay there and just stare at the wall and cry. There was no, oh, I'm going to just drift to sleep. It was like, what is happening? I'm rattled, like all these things. And then my second had some heart problems, so we were dealing with that. That was obviously extremely worrisome, so I would just be worried.
Yeah.
But what it eventually taught me to do in those early weeks, and that led into the first kind of 3 months, was have that time in the evening to just be not touched.
Yeah.
Don't touch. Like, no one's breastfeeding, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I would just lay there, and that would be my stretch of sleep eventually. And then my partner would put the baby to bed. And then the next waking after midnight would be, I'm on duty for the rest of the night then. So all of a sudden you have this 4 hours, which was like a godsend. I don't know how I would go on without it. Although I will say there were times when he couldn't get the baby to take the pumped milk or whatever.
Right,
and I would say, but it's a different experience to have a baby pass to you at 10 p.m.
Feed them and then send them right back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Quick bop. And then he would like watch a show. Well, and then he'd like whatever, pick something that just because he's not a TV watcher usually, but in this moment of newborn survival, you just find small joys to get you through this time. And that was his evening, which brings me to another point I was going to mention, like unsafe sleep surfaces, especially when they're not supervised, would be something like a couch, a car seat for a long period. And one of these nights I remember, and I know he wouldn't mind me sharing the story. I was in bed in this evening, like shift of mine, and this is when we had one kid, and he comes in, he fucking whips open the bedroom door. He's like, "It happened." I'm like, what? What happened? He rolled off the couch. Like, yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was our couch. Oh, this was, of course, we were right out of university, so we had a really low to the ground, kind of crummy secondhand couch. Luckily, and so he rolled. He had to be 6 weeks old. Old enough to roll.
Sure.
So he rolled off the couch, smoked the floor, and I, of course, when in need, you wake up the person. It was all cutie, but he was totally fine. Like, as you know, he's totally. But it was just like, oh my gosh! So he left him on the couch for a second, and he just happened to roll. So a good reminder.
It's important. Yeah, and we've all been there. Like, I mean, my favorite like kid hitting their head story is my husband was holding our middle one at a dinner table one time, and she was just kind of like just gaining head control. So he was kind of letting her experiment, and all of a sudden she just face planted the table. And we were at like a family dinner. Like there must have been 30 people watching this.
Who is this dad?
Yeah, exactly. And
Aw.
honestly, like, I mean, she was my second kid, so I wasn't as, precious about it. I couldn't help but laugh.
It's true.
This is the shit that happens. And like, we're not telling you to injure your kid's head, of course, but
Things will happen.
these things happen.
And it's very likely okay.
It's
It's
very
gonna
likely
be fine.
okay. Yeah.
It can feel in the moment very, very crazy
Terrible.
though. So,
Terrible. Yeah.
oh my gosh.
I'm laughing now. I wasn't.
Same. We can laugh now that it's been a while. So
Oh, man.
and so on this note too, so we're looking at a safe sleep space, good attire, all that. Something else that's really important to watch is our wake time.
Yeah.
How long is our baby awake for? How long can a newborn stay awake for?
This is really important because people think that babies will sleep when they need to sleep. And sometimes that's true. But also sometimes it's not true. And sometimes babies will be awake like some 3, 4, 5 hours at newborn. It's far too long for a baby to be awake at that age. So the question, how long? A brand new baby is usually only awake long enough to eat. And even when they're eating, they're like half asleep. So we're talking like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And then by age 3.5, 4 months, they're up to about an hour and a half. So we're talking from birth to 4 months. The change in awake times is only, 45 minutes to an hour greater increase. That's short.
It's
right?
short.
That's
yeah.
not a lot of time.
It's not. And I think well-meaning, I'm going to throw Mimas under the bus here, like relatives who are like, they're asleep when they're tired, or like, they don't look tired
Or keep
to
them
me.
up. They'll sleep better tonight.
What
no.
a lie. Fake news. It's such a lie. It doesn't happen.
I'll tell you why. I think it's nice to know the science behind it sometimes. So when babies are awake, or humans are awake past like their ideal time to sleep, their body starts producing cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And what that hormone does is it keeps us awake. It allows us to stay more alert when we are tired, and it gives us what we call like that second wind. So imagine you go out to a concert. You usually go to bed at 10 o'clock as an adult, but you're out past midnight and you're kind of, get tired around 10, but then you kind of perk back up and you have a great night and you're fun and you're awake and you're happy and you get home and your mind's kind of racing and it's hard to settle. You're like, I should be tired right now. I'm like, it's like 3 hours past my bedtime, but you're not. That's the cortisol. That's the stress hormone. Babies get the same thing. And so, if they're up for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours as a newborn, there is a lot of cortisol in that baby's body. Well, what does cortisol do to babies? It makes them cry. It makes them cranky. It makes them hard to settle. It makes them require things like movement. If you have a movement junkie baby, shorten those awake times because it's possible that there's too much cortisol in their bodies and they're having trouble settling. So, keep an eye on those awake times and encourage your baby to fall asleep after they've been awake for, 45 minutes to an hour, by going to a quieter space, a darker room, giving them some rocking, nursing, a bottle, cuddles, take them for a stroller walk, whatever you need to do to encourage sleep. Do it.
I like that. I think that's a good, because we all know, or you're soon to know if you haven't had your baby yet, that an overtired baby is harder to get to sleep, and it's harder for them to stay asleep too because they're just out of sorts. And I think too, on that note of like, how do you settle? So let's say it's 45 minutes or 60 minutes they're awake and they're fussy or they're not going down for sleep, and you're like, well, I know they need it, but they won't do it. It can be really in the heat of the moment stressful and tempting to ping pong around to like, okay, I'm going to shush them and sway them for a minute. Okay, no, that's not working. I'm going to pop a bottle or the breast in their mouth. Oh, that's not working. And you jump around to all these different things, and instead just slow down and stick to one for a few minutes, like a good swing or a sway or a walk or whatever you end up doing. And then if it's not working after a good 5-10 minutes, like swap to something different.
Yeah. I think that's wise. And I think another point here is to regulate your own feelings in those moments. Because when your baby is crying and when your baby is not settled and all you want this baby to do is sleep, inevitably you are also then creating cortisol in your own body. You're stressed, your anxiety increases. And our babies co-regulate with us, which means that our emotions are really intimately connected so much when they're newborns, all the way up
for
to
years.
Yeah, forever.
Mm-hmm.
But especially when they're newborns. Their entire understanding of the world comes from the emotional climate that we offer them. And so if we are super anxious or super stressed or whatever, it is hard. It will become harder for our babies to settle because they're sensing our feelings. So like a great piece of advice, honestly, is if your baby's freaking out, take some really deep breaths yourself. Those deep breaths will signal to your body to calm down the nervous system, to kind of like regulate that system a little bit, and that'll help the situation, I promise. Another story I always tell about like my own postpartum experience. I was, in the middle of postpartum depression. My baby was probably 6 or 7 months old. I was desperate for her to sleep because she had been up for hours. She was crying hysterically. It felt like she had been crying for 2 hours straight. I don't know if that's true. That's my memory of it. No one was home. It was me alone. And I couldn't get her to sleep. And I was sitting on the floor bawling, and she was bawling. And it was like probably my lowest moment as a parent. And I called my husband, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck to do. I'm freaking out. I was bawling. Like, I don't even know if I was talking to him. And he answered the phone like, is everything okay? What happened? And I'm like, I don't know. Everything's awful. Come home now. He's like, I will. And then he just started talking to me. He was like, like, I don't even know what he was telling me. I can't remember anything about the conversation. But as we spoke, like listening to him talk and like just hearing his support and knowing he was coming, I started to calm down. She fucking fell asleep in my arms. I'm not even kidding, because I calmed down.
Isn't that insane? They do this to us.
They do. And I learned so much that day about like my own, the impact of my emotional climate on my baby. And so, and also about the value of social support, right? Like I was so isolated in that moment. I had people I could have called. I don't know why I didn't. I was, trying to be a hero or something, but yeah, anyway, I don't know how we got there.
No, I think about your feelings and your state of mind when you're going through this, and to pick up the phone and be able to call someone. But if it's 2 a.m. and you have no one, that can be hard too. And so it's okay at times, especially if you are so escalated and you're dysregulated, put them down on their safe surface and just walk away for like 2 minutes. Set a timer for 3 minutes maybe, and take some deep breaths. Nothing's going to happen to them. Even if they're wailing for 3 minutes, it's going to be fine. So just give yourself that permission. If for nothing else, well, for you matter for sure. But if for nothing else in the heat of that moment, it should help your baby settle if you're a little calmer.
A doctor said to me once, your baby can't fall off the floor. So like if you're in a moment of like deep struggle and you need to take that space and it's your mental health, right? This is, by the way, this is how shaken baby syndrome happens.
I was going to say, you can see it how people, like it happens.
Because if you're in that, like you're desperate, you're exhausted, your mental health is struggling, like you're not the like calm, rational person that you feel like you normally are. It's a totally different world. And like my doctor said to me, your baby can't fall off the floor. Put the baby on the floor and walk away. It's not going to be the end of the world. You need to care for yourself too. And those pieces of advice are really important.
I think so too, especially as a first-time parent. If you don't, like it feels like you need to respond immediately, but when you have multiple kids, like if you have an older toddler who's about to like climb the stair railing and you have to stop and tend to them and the baby's left crying for a couple minutes, we don't bat an eye.
No,
that's
we
just
don't.
the reality.
Because that's life,
Or if you have multiples, like you only can do so much. You have so many hands. So so just give yourself that permission in the heat of the moment to like set them down, catch a beat. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. If you're in that place right now and listening to this, I just want to, say I'm sorry that this
give
is
you
hard.
a hug. I want to give you a big warm hug.
I like remember myself, like, as we speak about this, I'm really like brought back to that moment. And it's just, it's tough.
It's heavy. It can be isolating. Even if you have people around you who are, like if you're lucky enough to be in that camp, it's still a lot because you are it for that baby, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And it will pass much sooner than you think, because before you know it, your baby will be approaching 4 months, which we're going to talk about on our next episode. It deserves its own because a lot happens there, and it's an exciting time in the world of sleep.
Yeah. So if you're approaching 4 months, look for our next episode.
Thanks for listening. Just remember, the shit is hard, but you are killing it.
To stay in touch, you can find us at betterbedtime.ca.